Hey, y'all, it's Michelle with SLP Full Disclosure. Welcome to the podcast today. I'm really excited about this one because I've never done a question and answer podcast. So that's what we're going to be doing today. And I got these questions from an amazing Facebook group that I found a few weeks ago called SLP Clinical Fellows. It's just a great place for SLPs to connect, share experiences, and also ask some questions. But what I've noticed is that there are not a lot of responses to the questions. So that's what we're going to be doing today. I've seen so many amazing questions. There's no dumb question. And I feel like a lot of the questions have been posted anonymously. And I wish that people would post who they are so that we can connect and put a face with a name. But I understand that sometimes you're a little hesitant to ask those questions. So what we're going to do today is we are going to answer some of those questions from the SLP Clinical Fellows Facebook page that I found. And I encourage you guys to all go and join this Facebook group. There's a lot of speech language pathologists in there, a lot of new clinical fellows, and then people like me who are a lot more seasoned. So it's a great place to connect and get your questions answered. And so that's what we're going to do today. And we're going to make sure that we link the Clinical Fellows Facebook page below so that you guys can go and follow that page. So here we go. A lot of questions about clinical fellows and licensure. So I'm going to just read the question and then we're going to just talk about it. So the first question was, I'm going to be a 6th-year SLP next year and will be supervising my first CF as well as being her building mentor in a large Title I elementary school. What recommendations do you have for supervision? What are characteristics that you admired in your supervisor? And what characteristics for clinical fellows do you hope that your supervisor would have to best support you? So I was a clinical fellow supervisor for the first time a really long time ago, probably 18 or 20 years ago. And I did it in a school district where I was working in Alabama. And it was very daunting for me. So clinical fellows, keep that in mind. You're not the only one nervous. It might be your supervisor's first time to be a supervisor as well. But I think the number one thing that I would recommend is communication, and more communication. And just understanding. We all know how difficult it is to go into your first job as a clinical fellow and you feel so overwhelmed. You're trained, you're ready, you have all of that academic knowledge, but there's a lot to be said about that on-the-job training. And we all know how much we learn from our students, from our patients that we treat. The knowledge that we get from just doing it in a real-life situation is just invaluable. I would also say being available. So my clinical fellowship year was 25 years ago, which was before text message, before cell phones, before email. And so I had to rely on a phone call and leaving a voicemail for my clinical fellow supervisor. She was so sweet. Her name was Roseanne. I was so stressed all the time, constantly leaving her voicemails. I remember one day, I think I left her like 5 or 6 voicemails and never heard back from her. But she was so sweet and she was always the one that called me back. Not all supervisors do that. So I would say be available. Nowadays, you can reach someone by text message, you can shoot over an email, and just respond to those questions. Respond to the email, respond to the text message. Let them know that as their supervisor, you are there for them to support them and that they can reach you any time of the day. I was so stressed. I was pregnant. I knew I was going to be moving. I was trying to sell a house. I was trying to buy a house in another state. And I had so much going on. And I feel like one thing that she did was she got to know me personally. And it wasn't strictly that CF supervisor and the CF. She wanted to know what was going on in my life because all of my life things were impacting how I was doing my job and how I was able to function in that setting. And so she took the time to get to know me and what I was going through in my personal life. When I've been a clinical fellowship supervisor, I think the hardest thing for me is I don't like confrontation. And the hardest thing for me has been to provide that feedback, that constructive criticism. And one piece of advice that I got from a friend of mine a long time ago was when you're doing that, you have to try to start with something positive, provide that constructive criticism. This is what we need to work on, and then end with something positive as well. Being open and honest in your feedback. If your clinical fellow is struggling in a certain area It's your job as the supervisor to bring that to their attention, even if that's a difficult conversation. My brother is a very wise man, but a man of very few words, runs a multi-million-dollar company, and he says that you are only as successful as the toughest conversations that you're willing to have. And that is so very true. And I've learned that as I've gotten older and worked longer in this field. If your clinical fellow is struggling with something, you have to bring it to their attention. I have had the pleasure of working with amazing clinical fellows, but I had one time who was really struggling in the area of assessments, just understanding the basals and ceilings, understanding how to stick to that standardization as you're giving the assessment and then interpreting those scores and then explaining it in a meeting. And it was really hard to watch her struggle in that area because I would go to meetings with her, had to provide a lot of feedback during those meetings and help her with explaining those scores to the parents, to the educational team that was there. And it was a really difficult conversation to have with her. We talked about it, we worked through it. And she told me many years later, because she continued to work in the same district that I was working in, she told me many years later that after I had that conversation with her and said, hey, this is a big area of weakness for you. What can we do to strengthen this area with assessments? She said that she went home that night and she cried. But she said in the end, she looks back and that was the most meaningful and the most helpful thing that she took from her clinical fellowship year was the fact that I did sit down with her and I did say, these are all of the things that you're doing great, but this is an area where you need to really work on. And so I think that just being available, being open and honest, being supportive, and just letting them know that you've been where they are and that it is going to get better. Next question. I'm planning on being a clinical fellow SLP at a school district in California. I was hoping anyone could recommend any resources or textbooks that I can look up and learn more about the workings in a school system, such as IEPs, screeners, assessments, just anything in general that I can feel more prepared. That would be great. So I have spent my entire 25-year career in the school district, and I think my number one piece of advice would be for you to go and become as familiar as you possibly can with IDEA and visit the California Department of Education website. If you're not in California, go to your state's Department of Education websites. Schools are a great place to work, but I will tell you, there are so many acronyms in special education that it can be very overwhelming. We literally speak in 3-letter terms all the time. It will become second nature to you, but in the beginning, it can be very overwhelming. Make sure that you understand the referral process. And what I mean by that is a speech and language referral process versus a comprehensive referral process. Those things often, that's where I see a lot of people getting confused on. Those are two very different things. Make sure you know who your school psychologist is, whether you're in California, Mississippi, Alabama, Maryland, wherever. Know who your school psychologist is because they are going to be a great resource for you. You need to be familiar with resource services. And I say that because so many times teachers will make that referral for speech services because it can be an easy way to get their foot in the door for special education services. But as a speech language pathologist, you need to be able to recognize when something is not just speech and language and when there may be some other areas of learning disability that might need to be explored. Also, school psychologist and your school resource teacher that provides those RSP services. As far as the assessments and the screeners, your school district is going to provide you all of those assessments and screeners that you need to do your job. As a graduate student, you have learned how to give those assessments, score those assessments, and interpret those assessments. But it might be something that you're not as familiar with. So if that's the case, as soon as you get access to those assessments, take them home and read them. Read the procedures. Read how they're normed, how to interpret the scores. Read all of it. And also practice giving them on friends. If you've got friends who have kids, or if you've got a neighbor, or even your roommate, or your husband, your spouse, practice giving the test. I know that sounds silly, but it really does make a difference when it comes to presenting that book, turning the pages, all of those things are going to impact how you give that test, and you want to be as efficient as you possibly can. It's going to take time to understand all of the ins and outs of how a school system works, like I said, mainly because of all of the acronyms, because there are so many moving parts, but you can do this. It's going to be a great placement, and you're going to have a wonderful experience in the school system. Just make sure that you understand IDEA, visit the California Department of Education website, become familiar with the acronyms, and most importantly, know your timeline. From the time you get an assessment plan signed or a consent form signed, how long do you have before you have to have that IEP meeting and all of those things? So your State Department of Education website is going to have all of that available. So no matter what state you're in, visit your State Department of Education website and be familiar with IDEA. Next question. Can you stay at a job for only 2 months as a clinical fellow, or does it have to be 3? I don't know about the 2 months, but this is what I will say. Changing your supervisors, and I saw a lot of questions on changing supervisors during your clinical fellowship year. So we're going to kind of cover all of those clinical fellow supervisor changing questions in this question. I actually changed supervisors during my clinical fellowship year. I did the spring semester in a school district in Florida. I had my daughter over the summer, and then I stayed home with her for 15 months. And then I finished my clinical fellowship in the state of Alabama. For me, it was a matter of paperwork. And from my research, because I did go to the ASHA website to make sure that everything was kind of the same, and it really is. Changing your supervisors during your clinical fellowship year, it happens, and it's okay. It's not that big of a deal. It's just a matter of paperwork. And I know that can be the biggest pain of it all, but it will be worth it. Make sure that you check the ASHA website. They do allow for changes in your clinical fellowship location and supervisors as long as the clinical fellow meets the 1,260 hour and 36-week requirements. It's just a matter of paperwork. Both your previous and your new supervisor will need to complete the clinical fellowship report and the rating forms. Your old supervisor will need to submit that paperwork to ASHA to show the completion of that portion of it. And make sure that your new supervisor is ASHA certified. It's just a matter of the supervisors being able to provide that required paperwork and that minimum supervision, which I think is 6 direct and 6 indirect observation segments. So if you are looking at changing your clinical fellowship supervisor during your CFY, do not panic. It is okay. It happens all the time, and it's just a matter of paperwork. So visit the ASHA website, and they will walk you right through it. All right. Next question. Hi, I am starting my CFY working for my county's Board of Developmental Disabilities as an early intervention SLP. I will be going into homes and providing therapy using the parent coaching model with a bagless approach. Would anyone with similar experiences be able to share any tips or things to know about starting a job like this? Thank you. So early intervention is my heart. I worked in early intervention in Alabama. I also did early intervention, my first travel contract with AMM. I would say that supervision is going to be critical during this time. So making sure that you have a supervisor who's going to be able to go with you on these home visits when you're providing these services in that natural environment. Early intervention is a very different therapy model, and it can take time to learn, especially after coming directly out of a graduate program where you don't do a lot of that. It's more direct therapy when you're in graduate school and working directly with patients and clients. I think my biggest piece of advice would be to understand that you are going into people's homes, into their private space, and to be aware of your surroundings first and foremost, making sure that you're in a safe place because you are in someone's home. And it's about connecting with these caregivers and these parents and being able to provide feedback to them in a way that they understand. Our training as speech-language pathologists can get very detailed, and we can be very sometimes medical in our explanation of things. So you're going to have to learn to adjust how you talk to parents because not all families and not all parents or caregivers have that background and training that we have. And what we take for second nature as we're talking with our peers or talking with other professionals in the school or a hospital, and they understand. Parents don't understand that. So making sure that when you're talking to parents, you're explaining it to them in a way that they understand and that you're connecting with these families. Sometimes once speech language pathologists come on board in an early intervention situation, it can be really when they're starting to realize something's not quite right. You may be working with medically fragile children who have very fragile medical diagnoses, and understanding that in these early years in that birth to 3 population, these families are still grieving. And so taking that into account and understanding that sometimes it can be hard to have those conversations, but just connecting with the families, making sure that when you're talking with them, that you're explaining it to them in a way that they can understand. And that bagless model is amazing. I love that because it allows you to incorporate into your sessions, and your sessions are going to be including the parents. You're going to be teaching them basically how to work with what they have in their home. I've said it before and I'll say it again. You can do motor play with a wooden spoon and a plastic bucket. You don't have to have a ton of things. So whatever that family has in their home, use that to your advantage and teach them how to incorporate that into their daily routines. So you're going to have a great time. It's amazing. Early intervention is the best. All right, next question. Is it possible to find a CFY position in the United States as an international applicant? If yes, how? Are U.S.-based employers open to hiring candidates looking for a CFY position? So I did have to Google this one, but a lot of international applicants do work in the United States as clinical fellows. I think that one of the first things that came up is just making sure that you're compliant with all the visa requirements, which I did not get into detail about that because it was a lot of information. But also understanding that here in the United States, each state has different licensure requirements. So going to that state department, that speech language pathology website for that state and finding out what their licensure and application process is going to be very beneficial to you. But what a great way to visit the United States. I would also say contact an AMN recruiter. Tell them that Michelle from SLP Full Disclosure referred you. I promise you that they're going to be able to answer any questions that you may have. But visiting the ASHA website is going to have a lot of information on there. I don't know how to find out about the visa requirements, but if you're an international applicant, I'm sure that you know how to do that. But I think the biggest thing is that understanding when you have your ASHA Cs, you also have to be licensed separately in each individual state. That was another question that we got that I think I'll address really quickly. Is there a limit to the number of state licenses that you can have? And I did Google that, and no, there is no limit. You can be licensed in as many states as you want. It's just a matter of making sure that you get all of your continuing education for each of those state licenses, which I thought was really cool. I think I currently hold 3 state licenses. So, next question. Hey, everyone. I just graduated and I'm thinking about either working in the schools through a contract company since it's the middle of the year or with a PEDS private practice. I was wondering what you guys think is the smartest decision. I love everything about the schools, such as the schedule, the environment, all the built-in breaks, but I feel like I'm cutting myself short by going the contract route due to lack of mentorship. I feel like at a private practice, there are more SLPs that you can bounce ideas off of and learn from, especially in your clinical fellowship year. What do you guys think? The first thing that I want to address is, and I'm only speaking for AMN, is the misconception that you would have a lack of mentorship with a contract company during your clinical fellowship year. I know specifically with AMN, we provide specific clinical fellowship year mentorship programs with direct access to clinical managers as well as other SLPs at the district or other SLPs with AMN. So with AMN specifically, you will not have a lack of mentorship and you will not have a lack of a clinical fellowship year supervisor. I think the school district is an awesome place to work. Like I said, the schedules, the environment, the opportunity to work with a wide variety of students from kids that are ARTIC or language only to working with children who have multiple disabilities. And also a great place to co-treat with other professionals, OT, PT, school psychologists. That's where I learned so much about assessments was from my friend Katie, who's actually been on the podcast before. And I've learned so much about fine motor development, gross motor development, positioning, and all of that from my OT and PT friends. In my 25 years, I've been so blessed to work with so many amazing SLPs, whether they were at my school, whether they were in my district at another school, and even with AMN. When I switched from Maryland to my current contract, my recruiter immediately set me up with another SLP who was working in the same district as I was working in as a teletherapist, and we were able to connect, bounce ideas off of one another, and it was just great. So I know that with AMN, you would have great support through your clinical managers, through the clinical fellowship mentor program, and with the CFY. I don't have experience in a private practice. I've never worked in that arena, but I do have friends who have. And I will say that this is just hearsay, information alleged. I don't know how you want me to say it, but that it can be a numbers game. It can be a numbers game with billing, the number of clients you see, contact minutes, all of that. And sometimes with little to no downtime for billing and paperwork. And in the school district, you're going to have that time and you're going to have that support. So. Oh, here's the question about the number of state licenses that one SLP can have. And no, there is no limit of state licenses. It says that an SLP can obtain as many licenses, particularly if they are licensed in their home state and also obtained. So this is what I learned. I do want to talk about this. It's the compact privileges to practice in other member states. I had heard about this before, but I had never really done a lot of research on it. So I'm glad I was able to do this. An SLP's home state license is the foundation for practicing in other states through the ASLPIC, which stands for, here we are with the acronyms again, Audiology and Speech Language Pathology Interstate Compact. This allows you to receive, if you're if you are licensed in your home state, and your state has this interstate compact with another state, you are allowed to practice in that state. So if an SLP's home state is a member of the ASLPIC, this interstate compact, they can apply for a compact privilege, which allows them to practice in other participating states without obtaining a separate license in each state. I have never personally done this. I don't know how it works. So if anyone out there listening has gone this route, I would love to hear from you to see how this works. There was an important note. It says, even if your state is a member, you still need to apply for a compact privilege to practice in other member states. There's an application on their website, aslpcompact.com. We'll make sure to link that in case that might be something that you want to explore and see if your state where you're licensed is a member of that interstate compact. Interesting fact that I did not know. All right. Does anyone do a school during the year and then PRN with adults over the summer? Yes. I know my friend Caitlin does that. I think that that's something that is pretty common. A lot of SLPs who work contract may do other things during the school year. So yes, I think that's something that's pretty common. I'm applying to CF SLP positions right now in Southern California, and I'm really worried I won't get a job position at a school district. I haven't heard back from the majority of the school districts that I applied to in Orange County, and it's been a couple of weeks, so I don't really know what to do. I need a job, and I'm worried that I won't get offered one since I don't have any experience. Number one recommendation, call AMN and get connected with a recruiter. Tell them that Michelle from SLP Full Disclosure referred you. Working with a contract company, especially a recruiter at AMN, they're going to have insight on all the jobs that are posted in your local area. And I know you're probably thinking, well, I don't want to be a traveler. There are travel contracts, there are local contracts, there are teletherapy contracts. I know you won't be able to do that if you don't have any experience, but there are options out there, and the recruiters are going to have access to those positions, and they're going to be able to provide you more details and connect with the district on your behalf and hopefully bridge that gap and get you into contact with those districts. So call AMN, get connected with the recruiter. I know it's a very stressful time. I know school districts are super busy right now trying to get their jobs posted, find out who's coming back, who's not coming back. So there are going to be a lot of jobs posted, and that wait time, I know it's very stressful. So I would recommend contact AMN and get connected with the recruiter. Let them know where you are, where you're looking to work, and they're going to be able to answer your questions for you. All right. Is anyone currently waiting for their RPE license in California? And did you all receive confirmation via email that they received your paperwork? The waiting game is killing me, and it's only been 2 weeks. Well, I can tell you from personal experience, if you are in California and you are waiting, you better hurry up and wait because it is going to take a minute. Licensing in California was the longest and most difficult process that I've ever been through in my entire 25-year career. That's another perk of working with AMN and having a credentialing specialist and a credentialing team to work with you and for you and help you go through that process, making sure all of the I's are dotted, all of the T's are crossed. I don't really know what RPE means, but I do know that in California, as a speech language pathologist, you have to have a CTC credentialing. And that is what took me over a year to get. It was not easy and it was a long, drawn out process. Licensing, there were a lot of questions on the SLP page on Facebook about licensing. I will say that I'm licensed in 3 states right now, and California was the longest. I think they probably have the most to process, but it really varies from state to state how long that process is. When I got licensed in Maryland, it was a very easy, painless process. When I got licensed in Colorado, same thing, and in Mississippi. So the licensing process and that timeline varies greatly from state to state. But again, that's another great perk of working with AMN because you have a credentialing team and a licensing team that's going to help you walk you through that process and let you know where you are, what you have done, what you haven't done, what you need to do next. So, hi everyone. I am looking for a medical CF position in Florida that is either inpatient or outpatient. My experience has been mostly with pediatrics in private practice or in schools. I have applied to multiple places and got rejected due to lack of experience. Does anyone have any recommendations as to what else I can do to enhance my resume so I can have a better shot? Any advice is appreciated. I know that working with AMN and a recruiter, I think we do have a medical certification that SLPs can get, and they are highly knowledgeable in walking you through that process and how to get that certification. Again, they're going to have insight on all the jobs posted, and it's just a great way to get access to more jobs in your area. So again, AMN, they're the best. We've got time for a couple more questions. Let's do a couple more. I just got my C's, transitioning between jobs and have some time off. I feel overwhelmed and behind all the time. This has been said multiple times everywhere. The field is huge and there's so much to know. I feel like I can never know enough and that I always have to do something in regard to continuing education or read up on things on how to be a better SLP. Then you can read a gazillion things, but we're all human and it's just really hard. There's so much information. How do I go about finding out how to stay on top of the field? And does anyone else feel the same way? Absolutely, 100%, you are not alone. Everyone feels the same way. I don't think people understand the vastness and the diversity in the field of speech language pathology and all of the things that we have to learn when we're in graduate school, from pediatrics to adolescents to geriatrics, the medical side of it, the anatomy and physiology, all of those things. It is so much information, but I promise you, you are not alone. Everyone feels the same way. I've been doing this 25 years and I feel like I learn something new every day, which is what we should be doing. My recommendation for you is to take a deep breath, relax, know that you are prepared. You just got your C's, so you're obviously new to the profession, but you are ready and you can do this. You are going to learn so much from working directly with clients in your first job, and you are going to do an amazing job at it. I remember one of the classes that I took, it was some kind of developmental class. I don't know. We were talking about lots of different syndromes and the characteristics of the syndromes and what their speech patterns were like and what their language development was like. And all of them have the genetics and the chromosomal abnormalities and all of these things. And it was so overwhelming for me when I was in graduate school. And I remember trying to study and make acronyms and learn and how am I going to memorize this for the test? And then I get into the school district and I had an opportunity to work in a multi-handicap unit. And I worked with students with very rare chromosomal abnormalities and syndromes. And it made sense to me. because once you can put a face to a name, you're going to remember that student and how their language developed, what their patterns were like, and it's going to make more sense to you. So just be patient, take a deep breath, don't feel overwhelmed, don't do too much. You're going to be an amazing SLP, and it's going to all work out for the best. Last question. I work with a lot of preschool age clients who have articulation phonological processes as their goals, and some of them I'm not really sure what to do to get them to attend. I've been trying play-based sessions and choosing words that address their goals, but I feel like I'm not doing enough. Any advice for this or any style of play activities to use? Yes, littles are hard, but make it fun. You're doing the right thing going the play-based way, but find what is motivating for them. And I know that sounds simple, but sometimes it can be really hard. What do they like? Do they like dinosaurs? Do they like cars? Do they like a favorite video? Do they like bubbles? Do they like baby dolls? What do they like? Find what is motivating to them that is going to get them to work. Use that if-then. If you do this 3 times, then you can have your toy. Also, get them moving. We can't expect our 3 and 4-year-old kids, and sometimes even our 5-year-old kids, to sit still for a 30-minute session and attend to something that we have brought to the table. Let them choose, but get them moving. Do sessions outside. Do movement activities with them. That always seems to help when they're not, because they're sitting in class all day long. And sometimes when they get up and they come to speech and they start getting their wiggles, I tell them all the time, you're wiggling a lot. Let's stand up and let's do some jumping jacks. Let's stand up and, stretch our arms. Let's do something. But getting them moving. Movement activities are really, really helpful. That was a lot of questions, and that was so much fun to do. I would encourage all of you guys to go out to Facebook. I don't know if the young people do Facebook anymore. But if you're on Facebook, go find the SLP Clinical Fellows page and follow it. Post the questions. Don't be afraid to post responses. I'm going to continue to follow this page, and if we need to do this Q&A again, we're going to do it again. If I start seeing a lot of questions that aren't being responded to, we're going to do this again, because I think it's important as a field that we stick together. It's important that we support one another. If you have a question, somebody else probably has the same question as well, because there were tons of questions about clinical fellows. So I hope you guys have enjoyed the podcast today. I hope it has been helpful. Go follow us on SLP Full Disclosure TikTok, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Thanks. Thank you for tuning in to SLP Full Disclosure. You can learn more about this episode and our show on our website at amnhealthcare.com. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend and subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast platform. You can also find show updates and SLP opportunities on our Instagram at AMN Allied. Special thanks to AMN Healthcare for making this show possible. See y'all next time.